Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. Over the years of talking about weaponized weather and why the government selects specific spots, or why the global government selects specific spots to target these events at, there's many things that go behind it. They will target people who are resistant to joining NATO or the New World Order, like what we saw in Turkey. We will see what we're seeing in Florida, conservative states being targeted. But you also always have to remember, natural resources are a target for the globalists to be able to come in and seize the land after creating one of these natural disasters. And the headlines that are out there talking about devastation from Hurricane Helene that could bring semiconductor chip making to a halt. And I want to cover various topics with this that you have to pay attention to in regards to lithium and semiconductors. Now, we all know that the government has patents that give them the ability to steer and control hurricanes that they create themselves, as well as tornadoes, cyclones, you name it, they have the ability to do it. One of the things I've talked about over the last couple of months is how FEMA is coming in and attempting to buy land. They're coming in and flooding out zones saying that they're unlivable, and then FEMA is offering money to these people. Now, the government comes out and says that this is beneficial for the people, that at least they're getting money out of it. And they're also saying that it helps save FEMA from future insurance payouts because the properties that were flooded are in flood zones. So it's just going to be a continuous thing. So it's a win-win for everybody, right? And of course, just like in Maui, where the residents didn't want to leave that specific area of land in Lahaina, we're hearing a lot of similar stories about the residents in North Carolina who were offered cash to sell their land in that area and refused to leave. The land and the area is filled with lithium. The land in the area is one of the largest, if not the largest, they claim, provider over semiconductors, and is going to cause a slowdown in the supply chain. Now, I'm going to play for you some of the stuff that aired on the news, but you have to pay attention to what I talk about afterwards, because remember, there's this transition that's going to occur from cell phones being in your hand to technology being inside of your body. And we've often wondered, how would they start marketing that to us? Wow, will there actually be a slowdown in the supply chain of manufacturing cell phones after this hurricane? Because they're telling us that this town that got hit, this mining town, is the #1 producer of semiconductors. And I'll go into detail after the fact, after you see these clips, about the other semiconductor they never talk about, which are human beings. Human beings can serve as semiconductors. But for those of you that don't know what a semiconductor is, they are pretty much the brain inside of your mobile phones, smartphones, digital cameras, televisions, refrigerators, LED devices. That's what semiconductors are needed for. And obviously, in a world that's so dependent on technology, well, we know that people are going to be very upset if they can't get access to these things. So here they are explaining to you about how this targeted hurricane hit this little old town that's responsible for providing the world with semiconductors.
How is it that a hurricane in one part of the world might well cause consequences that could reverberate for all of our lives? Well, it comes down to the fact that so many of our lives depend on what's inside these devices, semiconductors. It's the brain inside not just smartphones, but computer chips, servers, the whole lot. Basically, 99% of activity around the world depends one way or another on semiconductors, so they're really important. And for the most part, they're made in places like this. This is TSMC, it's their fabrication plant in Taiwan. And inside each of these machines, you have a lot of these things whizzing around. They're called silicon wafers, and they get imprinted, little round things. They get imprinted with lots of different transistors, tiny little transistors, smaller than the wavelength of visible light, so quite literally invisible. Billions of them on a space as small as a thumbnail. And this is sliced up, essentially, and then that is what becomes the brain inside your device. So they really matter. And being able to create the silicon wafers upon which those transistors are implanted and etched, that really matters as well. So these are the silicon wafers before they've gone to the plant, okay? And here's where things get very relevant. They are made of a very pure type of silicon. They have to be absolutely perfect because you're talking about stuff where the transistors are so small that you don't want anything, any rogue atom introduced into that. And making that is quite hard. You have to break down a form of very pure silicon inside this crucible. This crucible here is the key bit we're going to be talking about in a second. That crucible also needs to be really pure, and it's made, for the most part, you see the crucible here, they are made of a special type of sand. It's called ultra-high purity quartz. And this is a sand which is very, very pure, so you're not introducing any imperfections into that mix. And here's what's relevant about the Hurricane. The vast majority of the world's supply of the purest form of high-purity quartz comes from one place, Spruce Pine in North Carolina. I'm going to zoom in to where Spruce Pine is, and you can see there are the mines and the quarries over there. You can see some of the processing plants there. There's a company called Sibelco who works there, another called the Quartz Corps, which is down there. And the critical thing is much of this area here, particularly around the river, has been flooded, engulfed with meters of water. And we don't know for sure what's going on in there. But what we do know is that Sibelco, who runs some of these facilities here and is responsible for most of this quartz, they say that they, as of September the 26th, have temporarily halted operations at the Spruce Pine facilities in response to these challenges. It's incredibly unusual. Incredibly unusual. And this is a core part, an outsized part of the supply chain that keeps those semiconductors going around the world. It's very early days, so we don't know how long this disruption is going to last. But one person I spoke to from the industry says that he very much doubts if this is going to be up and running for some months.
So the question becomes not just whether the mines themselves have been damaged, but also whether it's possible to get the quartz out. Disruptions would impact not only the $5 billion quartz market, but the $600 billion semiconductor market that depends on it. And that quartz is also used in solar panels, fiber optic cables, and some light bulbs, which could all see some issues as well. And Kelly, I just spoke a few minutes ago with the head of TechSet. They track the quartz supply chain. Their best guess right now is 4 to 6 weeks until things are back up and running in Spruce Pine, and that's if the roads are able to be cleared. So that alone could lead to at least minor slowdowns for the chip makers. And every day that timeline gets extended, Kelly, the impact just multiplies.
And so remind me again, when we talk about who in the chip world uses this quartz, is it pretty much everybody?
Every chip maker. So officials in Spruce Pine like to say that if you have a cell phone, if you have a computer, you have a piece of Spruce Pine with you. It's virtually the only place in the entire world that supplies this highly, highly pure quartz that's used in pretty much every semiconductor that's out there. So it was a vulnerability that was known beforehand, but now it's just, the question is really here. Before it was sort of a hypothetical, now it's a real question of what happens if they can't start to get this quartz out.
And I'm sorry, you said he thought it'd be a matter of days or a matter of weeks at this point?
They think at this point 4 to 6 weeks, but that estimate is dependent on the roads getting rebuilt. And the roads right now are sort of the biggest question in this part of the state. They're not just flooded, they're sort of disappeared. At some places, they're torn out of the ground. So if they can get those rebuilt quickly, that should be okay. They do think because the semiconductor market has seen a little bit of a slowdown recently in demand, that there should be some level of inventory. That's okay. But if it's anything more than about 4 weeks, I do think I've been told by experts that those ripple effects start to magnify.
So while a lot of people out there are thinking about, well, the government did that so that they can get in there and they can steal all of this and they can have all of this, the other thing you need to think about is that if these things are flooded out, these minerals are flooded out, well, they don't really serve that much of a purpose to them, do they? And I talked earlier about human beings being semiconductors. You may have heard that there are books out there. There's a lot of scientific data out there, specifically Robert Otto Becker's book called The Body Electric, where he discusses how the body is not a conductor. It's a semiconductor, little different than microchips that are produced in Silicon Valley for our computers. And there's a lot of data out there that talks about the exciting theory, at least to them it's exciting, that humans can be biological semiconductors, that the human body can act as a semiconductor. So you might be saying, where am I going with this? Well, if there's a shortage of semiconductors and there's a shortage of cell phones being produced, if that's where they start heading with this narrative, What would be the solution for that? Well, the human body can be used as a semiconductor. Now, this isn't a huge story yet about how this little town in Hurricane Helene got drilled and flooded out. They haven't told us yet that they're not able to get to any of the minerals because they've been completely flooded. And as you saw in that news clip, they talked about how clean and pure it is. Well, if it's laying in puddles and puddles of contaminated water, then it's not that pure anymore, is it? So then you say to yourself, well, if the semiconductors are not able to be produced by all these big corporations, what could we use as a semiconductor? Well, the answer to that is you can be used. Now, for those of you that think that this is a crazy conspiracy, it's not. In fact, I've shown you many times, and I'll show you right now, at the World Economic Forum, they were talking openly, and they've been talking openly, that the next wave of cell phones is going to be inside the human body. So if semiconductors start to see a drop off in the supply chain because they can't produce them anymore, people will say, well, I need a phone. Well, how do I function without this tech that they're so dependent on now using? So conveniently, it would be probably the right time pretty soon for them to come in and say, well, the next wave of cell phones, since we don't have this semiconductor that we can use anymore, could be used through your body because you could be used as the semiconductor and the cell phone could be in you.
The Matrix. Control. The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to keep us under control in order to change a human being into this.
Future, you will have such a good digital twin that you'll be able to go into the metaverse, into a virtual reality world, turn a dial, pull a switch, feel around, and actually change it in the real plant?
Absolutely. And this is not far off. I mean, the physical and the digital worlds, they will grow together, and the result is exactly what you just said.
I wanted to ask when you all think we're going to move from this form factor to something that's on your face, glasses, and when computing's all on the edge.
All right, 50 seconds. Who wants to answer quickly?
I think it will go. It will. First of all, it will definitely happen. I was talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030. I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
So you might see all that and think to yourself, whoa, that's a lot to comprehend, right? Semiconductor technology is so important because we're so dependent on it now. And if they were to say, well, now all of a sudden you can't monitor your blood pressure, you can't do all these things that semiconductor technology is using, which is pretty much all electronic devices, people would pretty much start going insane. So just imagine something like we saw in Stretch Armstrong, where suddenly the human semiconductor was able to be controlled using these towers that look a lot like the towers that we see up in every single town across America. Every mile radius around you has a tower like this that just conveniently went up while everybody was locked inside and didn't even notice it. In some cases, they even hide them to make them look like trees. But this is from Stretch Armstrong. I showed you this in the past, how humans are able to be controlled through these towers. Look.
The Smart Mark. Because the Smart Mark is more than just a phone. It's part of you. Use it as cash and even shoot video. The Smart Mark has brought order to my life.
World order is our destiny. Submit to a Smart Mark and join the glorious victory of order over chaos.
But your chip makes it possible to control everyone.
So, semiconductors are the fundamental building blocks of modern IT. Transistors, a type of semiconductor device, are the small electronic switches that perform computation functions in every tech gadget, from smartphones to electric scooters and data centers, military aircraft. They make possible the processors that power most of the world's smart gadgets. Well, what could help those gadgets actually run? If a human being is used as a semiconductor, what is going to be used as the human's the antenna? What is going to be used as a way to leverage these powerful semiconductors, right? Well, those towers around you would be what is used to leverage the semiconductor to support the connectivity, connecting human beings, the semiconductors, to the towers. Now, I'm not saying that this is where this story with Helene is going. I'm talking about the narratives that are out there, and remember the narratives that I've discussed. The narratives are that the government obviously is creating these weaponized weather events. That is you could check that off as a fact. They're targeting specific areas. They're not just targeting places at random. Obviously, they're going to target conservative states because the enemy to the globalist regime are nationalists in America, right? Are United States first people, conservative Republicans / Christians. So they're obviously hurting people into those states, hitting them with weaponized weather, but don't forget about the resources and the land grabs, right? We know about the land grabs. We know FEMA's buying up land from people, telling them in flood zones. They get them out of there. They move them where they want to move them. And they say these are unlivable zones. And they start changing really the mapping of the United States of America this way. But for everybody out there that's thinking about how the government did this so that they could take over those landmines for the semiconductor, think further than that. Think about potentially telling us that we're now going to see a shortage little by little in the ability to buy new phones and because we're going to see a consistent pattern of stories, not just Hurricane Helene wiping out that area, but a consistent pattern of stories that tell us, oh, wow, we could see a major shortage in technology being produced because of this, and this, right? Factor in the rumors of war. Factor in the stories about people's phones blowing up. There's lots of stuff out there that is going to shift us into getting conditioned into humans now knowing that they could be used as semiconductors and that this technology can become available to them. You have the stories about Neuralink and all that. The goal is to get underneath your skin and inside of your body. And if they make it more and more and more known to people that this technology exists, and then make more and more people comfortable with it while desensitizing them to the theories like the mark of the beast, making them, conditioned into thinking that we're all crazy, that this is normal, this is beneficial for their health, this will help them live longer, this will help them fight disease. And then, of course, telling them, hey, we might not have cell phones anymore, so what are you going to do? Go live like you're in Little House on the Prairie? Well, people will conform to it. So that's the narrative that I'm watching with this, because I've been waiting for stories to start coming out in regards to transitioning, knowing that the goal is to get the cell phones inside the body, knowing that humans are going to be connected with machine. But how are they going to start telling you that this is what's coming? Because they haven't really, other than some stories I've covered about them calling human beings antennas, and yes, talking about how humans could be semiconductors. There haven't been many stories other than just the basic Neuralink experiments going on with Parkinson's patients. There haven't been many stories where you'd say, oh, now I could see on a mass scale. They start telling you there's going to be phone shortages, chip shortages, and people can't get to the next phone. Their phones are getting dated. Their phones are getting shut off. Their phones are getting hit with EMP. All these things could potentially start occurring because they have to occur in order to transition you into the next step. And like the man from Nokia said, or the demon, I should say, from Nokia said, the evolution of the phone is the phone being embedded in you. So keep an eye on stories like this for transitions into things like that. Because if they start coming out, and they said in those clips, they said, look, they have a lot of it stocked up, so we don't have to worry about a shortage yet. And while everybody's thinking about, well, the government's going to go in and they're going to take all these minerals, well, if these minerals are completely underwater, they're not really going to serve much of a purpose to them, are they? So by them announcing this to you, do you think they're announcing it to you so that you could just start thinking like that? The government's coming in and stealing the resources. That's kind of the cookie cutter narrative of the conservative media right now is, oh man, just like in Lahaina where they did that deliberately, they wanted to grab the land, they want to grab the land. There's truth to all of that, obviously. But they're telling you this for a reason. And on the other side of what they're telling you to look at, they're quietly whispering that there could be a shortage of cell phone production, while not telling you that the plan overall and all along has been to use you as the semiconductor and hook you up to those towers. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. Share this video with others. Thanks again, everybody. God bless you and your families as always.